Well, hello there, everyone, and welcome to this next installment in the playlist series, which of course is Secrets, Fame, and Infamy. Now, last week I would love to have uploaded a video, but it was actually bank holiday in the UK over here, so took that bit of time off. Had a party with my friends and stuff like that, and this party started at 3 p.m. and then finished at 4 a.m. So that's 13 hours. Yeah. So I mean, it was impossible for me to record a video anyway. And oh my gosh, it took me about 2 days to recover. It was fabulous. It was fantastic. But today is Monday, and I went to a concert earlier on today, this evening, and obviously busy with clients and all that stuff. So it's been an unusually, it's just been very kind of social, very kind of busy. But we are in the summer here, but I did not want to miss another video because I like to make sure that you've got videos every Monday where we kind of look a little bit deeper into the charts of people that may be either famous or infamous, or there's some kind of mystery, something like that happening in their life, or the circumstances in which they left this earth even could be unusual or even slightly tragic. And we all know these celebrities, and what I want to show is that how Vedic astrology in particular can really show certain traits, certain propensities in a person's chart. Now, what I want all of you to understand is that just because there is some certain factors in a chart that may be challenging or negative, it doesn't mean they can't be overcome. They can be. However, the one caveat, the main caveat when it comes to a chart and transcending that chart, it must be done consciously. Yeah, it must be done consciously. The planets never... The Sanskrit name for the planets is graha, which means to grip. Yeah, means to grip. So we are all effectively, in many ways, under the grip of the planets. Let me just kind of let's just move that there so you can see that a little bit better. So we're all, to a greater or lesser extent, under the influence, under the grip of the planets. This is why basically astrology works, because you can see the archetypal pullings and maneuverings of the planets which affect the collective. However, when we become more conscious, we can then begin to transcend our charts and actually go into a kind of co-creation with the planets, where we bring out ideally the best potential in our charts. Now, why did I pick Anna Nicole Smith? And the reason why I picked Anna Nicole Smith today is because I wanted to show how addiction can manifest in a chart. And if you see this either in your own chart or other people's charts, then you know that, not always necessarily, but there is a good chance that that person may struggle with addiction or reality or escape, things like escapism and stuff like that. And I just think it's an important thing to see, because if it's happening in your chart, then, and if you've struggled with addiction, this could help you understand why, what some of those factors are. Or if you have family members that have struggled with addiction, and particularly as well, and as you know, many of you that watch my videos are based in the United States, but of course I have an international audience as well. But it's worth mentioning them, and I've said before in videos, the United States does have a particular quirk where the moon in the main chart is kind of vulnerable, and many Americans are vulnerable to addiction. And if we know of, aside from COVID and everything that is happening in these tumultuous times, this is all happening over a backdrop of opioid. Yeah, we have the opioid crisis in America in particular. And in many ways, Anna Nicole Smith who is a former model, former actress, and I'm going to read a little bit of her biography from Wikipedia so we can see certain things and how they manifest in the chart. But Anna Nicole Smith, in many ways, is like an archetype of an American story, of the American dream, but one that didn't quite work out. And it's an interesting chart, and it is a little bit of a tragic chart, but we also need to understand when people suffer from addiction, which is a very common thing, and particularly so many Americans' lives have been touched, but not only that, globally, all countries in the world, addiction is everywhere, and there's so many things that we can become addicted to. And there are some charts that are more prone to addiction than others, and this is what we'll explore, and this is what will emerge as we look at Anna Nicole Smith's life, and maybe and just some of the key factors and stuff that was going on. So I'll just show you her chart here. This is Anna Nicole Smith's chart, the D1. Which is where the planets were sidereally at the time that she was born, and of course the D9, which is the Navamsha, the chart of marriage. Not everyone gets married, but in this case, she did. She got married twice. So just to give you the little bit of story behind here, I'm sure many people will remember, and of course you're free to look up and have a little bit of research for yourself. So Anna Nicole Smith, she was born Vicky Lynn Hogan on the 28th of February 1967. 1967. And the time that I have here for her is 3:15 a.m. and she was born in Houston, Texas. And she was, so here we are. So she was an American model, actress, and TV personality. Smith first gained popularity in Playboy magazine. Do you remember she was a Playboy bunny? When she won the title of the 1993 Playmate of the Year. She modeled for fashion companies including Guess, H&M, Heatherette, and Lane Bryant. So, she did a few modeling gigs. Smith dropped out of high school at aged 14 in 1982. And then got married in 1985. So that's quite interesting. She got married when she was 17. So it's very young. She's still still a teenager. There you go. And then she divorced in 1993. And in 1994, she got married again. In her highly publicized second marriage to 89-year-old billionaire J. Howard Marshall, and resulted in speculation that she married him for his money. Do you remember that? For you guys that that remember that story, that was a massive thing. Which she denied. So following Marshall's death in 1995, so they got married in 1994, and then he died in 1995. He's old. Smith began a lengthy debate over the share of his estate. Her cases reached the Supreme Court of the United States, Marshall versus Marshall, on a question of federal jurisdiction, and Stern v. Marshall in a question of bankruptcy and court authority. So, there was big litigation, and we can see these things in the chart as well. And tragically, Anna Nicole Smith died in February 2007. In Hollywood, and in a Hollywood, it says in a Hollywood, Florida hotel room. How does that kind of work? 2007 in a Hollywood, Florida hotel room. That's what it says. Maybe I just don't understand that because I'm from the UK. As a result of accidental overdose on prescription drugs. So we'll be looking at those different things in there. In the months leading up to her death, Smith was the focus of renewed press coverage surrounding the death of her son, Daniel. Tragically, he died at 20. Visiting his mother after she gave birth to his sister. and the paternity and custody battle over her newborn daughter, who is called Danny Lynn Birkhead. Anyway, so we have this character, Anna Nicole Smith, and I'll make sure that I'll drop like her picture in here so we can see it for the duration of the video. So let's look at the first house. Now remember, we know what the first house is, don't we? It deals with the top of the head, the physical body, the constitution, personality, first impressions, the appearance, character, birth into this world, and it's a Kendra and a trine. And it deals with health and innate inspirations. So here, according to this time of when Anna Nicole Smith was born, she was a Virgo ascendant. Here we are. So there we see the ascendant there. But if you'll see, there's 1, 2, 3 planets in the first house. And in many ways, this really does kind of sum up certain elements that were prevalent in Anna Nicole Smith's life. So, oh crumbs. You know when you have a fly that has just done a dive bomb? Oh, heaven's sake. Yeah, see it? In your drink. That's what happened to me here. So, when we look at this, so when we look at Anna Nicole's first house, like I said, there's 3 planets there, and one of them is Venus, the other one is the moon, and the other one is Uranus. Now, this is significant. So remember, that, as I've said before, anytime there are planets in the first house, they have a significant say over the personality, yeah, and the life path in general. So if we look there, first of all, we have the moon. We have the moon, which is at 26 degrees 8 minutes. And let me just double check her chart to see what nakshatra it's in. And it's in the nakshatra of Chitra. And Chitra is the divine architect. So here there is an element of, first of all, when the moon is in the first house, it adds luminosity to the features in some way. The moon also deals with the masses and it deals with fame. So whenever there's the moon in the first house, it can actually increase the potential for fame, actually, believe it or not. And here, when the moon is in Virgo, she's actually really quite strong in Virgo. The moon does well in Virgo. It's a practical sign, it's an earth sign. But you can see, look, there's this aspect here from Saturn, yeah? An aspect straight there from Saturn. So immediately the Jaws music starts to play because, as we know, Saturn and Moon are the bitterest of enemies. Anytime there's association between these 2 planets, it's never really that good. It's never really that good. But particularly when they're opposing each other or in the same house, yeah, it's even stronger. When the moon is in the sign of Capricorn, she can get by. The moon is adaptability, yeah, but it's still not an ideal sign. She does slightly better in Aquarius, but whenever you have Saturn aspecting the moon directly, it can cause a lot of problems because remember, the moon is what? The mind, yeah, the mind over all. And it has this kind of disturbing, whenever Saturn looks at the moon or aspects the moon in any significant way, it disturbs the moon, it agitates the thoughts, gives a lot of fears and insecurities. Yeah, it can really affect the moon. But then also, what do we see here? We see Venus in the first house. And Venus is what? Venus is known as the planet, as the planet of beauty, yeah, primarily, but it's also the arts, entertainment, yeah, and entertainers, creative people. And it's in the first house, which of course is the body, and she was a model, yeah. So Venus here with the moon would give a person a very attractive body, a very kind of curvaceous body, and this is one of the things that she was known for. She was a bit of what? A bombshell, yeah. But also as well, you will see here, you've got Uranus in the first house. And the first house, Uranus is a rebel, yeah? It's rebel energy. But Uranus, its energy doesn't manifest as well in earth signs. Because if you think earth signs tend to be about stability. Now, Virgo is a little bit different because that is mutable earth, but it is still an earth sign. So it's about practicality. Yeah. Venus, Virgo it's a mutable sign, it's mutable earth, but it deals with the practicalities of life. So here she has a planet that is radical, wants to break the mold, do things that are unusual, and can even have a rebel streak to it. And it makes one think, she did get married at 17, which is, some of the, peak, teenage years where we are feeling more rebellious, just as an archetype. It's also about separation and getting away from things and liberation. It's also known as the planet of divorce. But it seems here that the energy of Uranus kicked in when she was 17 for her to potentially rebel or get away from a situation at home. She actually she was working in a diner, and she married one of the chefs, one of the cooks there, and then they had their son, who tragically passed away when he was 20. But a year after he was born, they divorced, if I remember correctly from the biography. But I don't want it just to be a read-off of a biography, because this is really about her chart. But one of the most important things that I need to point out here, which is probably the crux of everything, which is this. You will see here, there's Venus, but what happens when Venus is in the sign of Virgo? Yeah? She becomes debilitated. So here you have a planet in the first house, which is making a primary impact, is the planet of the arts and entertainment and all of those different things, but it's debilitated. So here, Venus in Virgo in her first house will give beauty, physical beauty. Now, obviously, a lot of people will be like, she's had surgery and all that kind of stuff. Yes, but remember, when Venus is in the first house, Venus is the planet of presentation. So when Venus is in your first house in particular, you're going to want to try and present yourself in the best light possible, because, Venus is in the first house. You want to look good. It has a lot of influence over the physicality. When you have Venus or Moon or Jupiter or even Rahu in the second house, that will give natural beauty, yeah? Because the second house is the face. So when you have a beautiful planet in the second house, you'll just get beauty vast majority of the time as a default. And the only way that a person doesn't get beauty in the second house is if they've got some other kind of several malefic aspects going on. But attractive planets in the second house will give that. But when it's in the first house, it can also give physical beauty, but the presentation becomes more important, because that's what people see. So people with Venus in the first house will want to present themselves well. Even Vladimir Putin, I think, has got Venus in the first house. And no one would necessarily say he's the most handsome person in the world, but he is interested in his appearance. And you can see, he has had a little bit of work done to kind of maintain that status. So he's aware of these things. So Anna Nicole would have been very aware of her physicality, of her body, and her ability to attract. And of course, she was, after all, she was a model. Yeah. And not just for Playboy, for other kind of fashion magazines as well. But here, Venus is not able to give the full blessing, yeah, because she's debilitated. So there's going to be a little spanner in the works. And when we actually think of Anna Nicole's career, particularly her acting career didn't take off very well. And I think it is partly to do with this debilitated Venus, because Venus is the film industry. Yeah, Venus also represents the film industry along with Neptune. So if your Venus is debilitated, it's going to be difficult the energies aren't quite lining up to facilitate that full transition, smooth transition into becoming a bona fide actor. I mean, she was an actor. She was in a few films, but they didn't really go anywhere. Venus wasn't able to kind of bless. You will often find that people that are famous or are in show business and stuff like that, they will tend to have a strong Venus in order to kind of stick around, and the sun will often be strong as well, because you need that support to sustain a career. Venus is the power of sustenance, maintenance. It is a planet of higher fulfillment, the ability to make choices that are beneficial to one's further development and increase in life. So if Venus is debilitated, particularly when it's debilitated in the first house, then sometimes it can show that a person may struggle with making the right choices. Not always, but most of the time. They may, like, so for example, of course, Anna Nicole was offered parts, but did she choose the right parts that would have forwarded her career? You know, quite possibly not. Particularly as well with the moon, with Saturn afflicting the moon, you know, her thoughts would have been rather chaotic. So there's that. Also as well, when we look here, when we look in the second house, which deals with family, you have values, nourishment, resources, the roof over one's head, again, security. We see that she's got Mercury there in the sign of Libra. And that's actually great, actually. Mercury does actually deal with actors, yeah? And Libra, of course, is an artistic sign. So we can see that was fulfilled, yeah? That was fulfilled. And Mercury deals with adaptability, etc. But look, you'll see here, Ketu is here. And Ketu is what? Snip, snip. Yeah, Ketu is snip, snip. And to see how well that Mercury is going to be functioning, we need to look at its dispositor. And the dispositor for Mercury in this instance is Venus, yeah? Because she rules the signs of Libra and Taurus. So you look where she is. Venus is in the first house, but she's debilitated. So this Mercury can't fire on full cylinders either, because the ruler of the sign itself is debilitated. So it dampens that again. So again, that would have affected her acting career as well. She may have also struggled with lines, remembering lines or long tracks of text, because here you've got Ketu is like a little whirlpool coming down and will be affecting, will also be affecting the speech as well. The second house is about speech. And Ketu can tend to have a weakening effect on other planets. Ideally, you would like the nodes of the moon to be on their own sometimes, but you know, well, at least Ketu on his own. So we can see that element there. But there's even more. When we look at Anna Nicole's third house, she's got here the sun in the third house in Scorpio with Neptune. And the third house is about what? If we look here, it deals with the hands, the arms, and the upper lungs, and the hearing. It deals with courage, life force. It deals with all forms of communication, siblings, cells, self-employment. It deals with the creative arts, yeah, obviously, acquired skills, primary thoughts, travel, can even deal with writing, self-made money, and entertainers of all kinds. So you can see by just these first three houses alone, 1, 2, 3, we can see here that she was an entertainer, and that was actually part of her destiny. And if we look again, the sun goes to the third house again in her chart, but this time it's with Saturn. So I'll explain that in a minute. So here we see an entertainer, but look, there's problems. Yeah, there's problems. We've got Neptune with the sun in Scorpio. Now, Scorpio, as we know, is the 8th sign of the zodiac, and it's relative to the 8th house, which we know is what? Sex, death, and rock and roll. Can deal with addictions and all sorts of things. It's a difficult house. So the sun in Scorpio on its own is actually it's relatively strong, It belongs to, Scorpio belongs to Mars, which is a friend to the sun. But the presence of Neptune is difficult. Now, I would say especially when it comes to Neptune, you want Neptune on his own, because his effect when on other planets is really quite profound. The outer planets, pardon me, the outer planets do affect any planets that they're with. But there's something about Neptune. Neptune is like separates us from this world. It dissolves the boundaries between the three-dimensional physical world and the spiritual realms beyond. But as you would have seen in many of my videos before, and I'm sure on other Vedic channels and traditional tropical Western astrology channels, Neptune can deal very much with drink, drugs, and deception, mystery, illusions. And here it is in the sign of Scorpio. So here what this suggests is that for all of the ditzy image that was projected, I think she felt things a lot more deeply than people realized. Yeah, I think Anna Nicole Smith felt things very deeply. Scorpio is the deepest sign, but it's also known as the sign of insecurity and the sign of self-undoing as well. This can be the shadow of Scorpio, undoing yourself. So here, what I have found is this. Whenever I see Neptune with the sun, which is the kingdom, Neptune has a dissolving effect on the kingdom. Yeah? It's like having a kingdom that is on an island, but it's always high tide, and the bricks are being eroded in some way, or they're covered in moss and lichen, they get slippery. Yeah, it can be very, very intuitive, but it can cause a lot of problems. Yeah, it can cause a lot of problems. Because, you know, Neptune is otherworldly, and the kingdom is here about your kingdom here on earth. It's like the strength, the integrity of your kingdom, your soul, the ability for you to go forward in a forthright and consistent way and be like the sun. Neptune interferes with that process because he throws fog in the way, mist. It can be very creative. It can be extremely imaginative, particularly as well when Neptune is in Scorpio. But the sun, that kingdom must be anchored, properly anchored, to be able to resist or withstand that constant watery, dissolving nature. When we look here, we've got Mars in Anna Nicole Smith's 5th house, and it's actually exalted. Yeah. What's the 5th house? The 5th house is creativity, the giving heart, true intelligence. It also deals with children as well. Good past karma, purva punya, deals with giving consultation and advice to others, talent, romance, speculation, sport, kings and politics, fun, spiritual pursuits, books, recognition, self-confidence. Yeah. So here, this shows that Anna Nicole actually had a lot of steeliness in her. Yeah. Very steely. Because this Mars is exalted. So when it came to her creativity, her creative projects, she had a lot of energy for that. She really wanted to pursue, she had a deep passion to be like an entertainer, a celebrity, you know, to be well known. And this can literally be one of the literal meanings of this. The 5th house is also about romance. It's also about speculation. It's also about play. It has a lot to do with gambling. Yeah. And, you know, just trying things out. And one of the things that's really interesting is that Anna Nicole Smith used to be a pole dancer at one point. And the thing is, you need a lot of energy for that. And you will see this. When Mars is strong, it can also manifest as dance. Yeah, as dance, because it's movement, energy. But also as well, it shows that she also had a strength to her, like literally like a physical strength, where she was able to kind of pull herself up and, you know, just do these routines. And it was at, let me just double check. when she was doing one of her routines, that's where she met the second husband. Now let's see here. Here we are. So series. Okay, problem. Let's see here. I can't find it here. Let's see. Aha. Here we are. So while performing at a Houston strip club in October 1991, October 1991, Smith met 86-year-old petroleum tycoon J. Howard Marshall. During their 2-year affair, Marshall reportedly lavished expensive gifts on Smith and asked her to marry him several times. So actually, it was a 2-year affair before they were married, actually. I mean, I read it, but I forgot that. So not insignificant, certainly not insignificant. So on June 27th, 1994, Smith and Marshall were married in Houston, resulting in speculation that she married him for his money. Yeah, of course, people would say that, and that would be an obvious conclusion, wouldn't it? She maintained that she loved Marshall and that age did not matter to her. And here we are. And on August 4th, 1995, 13 months after his marriage to Smith, Marshall died in Houston at the age of 90. Now, when she said age didn't matter to her, I think she's telling the truth. Yeah, she was telling the truth. And I'll show you here. You can see it in her chart. We go straight over to Anna Nicole Smith's 7th house. Look at that. Who's there? Saturn. Yeah, what's the 7th house? The 7th house is the house of what? Marriage. So it deals with relationships, marriage, desire, business, contracts, passion, foreign lands, courts, remember that? Open enemies, sexual passion, and public life. So here, Anna Nicole has got Shani, Saturn, in the 7th house. Now, what does Saturn deal with? Saturn deals with what? Mature things that are older. And so very often can be the case when a person has got Saturn in the 7th house, they will marry a partner that is significantly older than them. Saturn is the planet of age and maturity. But you will also notice as well, here, Chiron is there. And Chiron is the wounded healer. So this will also show as well that there can be potential wounds received in marriage. And not only that, this Saturn here is in the sign of Pisces. And Pisces can be a sign known for illusions. Yeah? It deals with sensitivity, intuition, wanting to help the underdog. So here, it seems, what I will speculate from this is that he kept J. Howard Marshall kept asking her over the two and a bit year relationship to marry him. And I think in the end, she maybe just felt a bit sorry for him. Yeah, she maybe felt a bit sorry for him because Pisces is the sign of compassion after all. So it's in her 7th house. Also as well, Virgos, as I've said before, sometimes have a vulnerability here when it comes to relationships and marriage partners. Because Pisces and Jupiter and Neptune are ruling the 7th house, it can mean that they may not necessarily be as realistic when it comes to their relationships, because Pisces is all about fantasy, the emotions, being lost in the moment, illusions, delusions even. But it's also about pathos. It's also about charity. So I think it was a combination of those things where you can imagine she'll be at the club and he'll be there, every night, probably paying her the most tips. And, as she's performing, might even be giving her diamonds and all sorts of other gifts and stuff like that. And she's probably, in the long run, she probably thought, you know what? I feel a bit sorry for him. I'm sure, obviously, I mean, people, you guys be like, oh, of course it was just for the money, whatever. Oh gosh, these cars late at night, they kind of crash a lot on the bollards, not the bollards, the speed bumps. And of course, yes, the money would have been obvious to her. It would have been showering her with gifts. But I can see here there would have been compassion too, and not quite a realistic perception of how that relationship would pan out. But what is so interesting here, when you look in a Navamsha chart, yeah, and the Navamsha chart kicks in, particularly when we're 40, but of course when we get married. And if we look here, this gives an insight to the strength of that Saturn, because this strength on the strength of this Saturn looks a little bit suspect in Pisces. But when you look at the Navamsha, look, Saturn goes to Libra, where it is exalted. But it also means that her sun here in Libra is debilitated, yeah, in the second half of life. And this can be very challenging because it can be hard to dig yourself out of the dumps, out of the doldrums, when you've got the sun, the kingdom, debilitated in the second half of life. But here, this Saturn is kind of making up for it by being exalted. So it shows this mature man, yeah, this mature man, J. Howard Marshall, was exalted in some kind of way. And of course, he was what? A billionaire. Yeah, he was a billionaire. So sometimes it can be as simple as that. But let's talk as well about the addictions. Yeah, because this is something that she really suffered from. And in fact, one of her doctors believed that she may have even been bipolar. And if we go back to this aspect here with the moon being aspected directly by Saturn, also in the presence of Uranus, which is a disturbing influence anyway, and Venus, which is debilitated, all in the first house, you know, that could well be the case. The mind would be very unstable, because on one hand it's being starved. The moon is being starved by Saturn, and the moon is starving Saturn back by her aspect. But you got that Uranus there, which is that electrical energy, that unpredictability. But the biggest one of the biggest markers when it comes to addiction, we need to look at the 8th house and we need to look at the 12th house. Yeah. And addiction can even be seen a bit from the 6th house as well. But these two are like dead giveaways. Dead giveaways. Even the 2nd house can even show a bit of addiction, because it's the mouth. Yeah. So sometimes if you've got a malefic in the 2nd house, the person may like to drink or even smoke too much or eat junk food. Yeah. That kind of thing. But here, looky here. So in the 8th house, which is ruled by Aries, and we need to also understand that Mars for Virgos is a difficult planet. But in the 8th house, we've got Rahu. And what is my nickname for Rahu? Gobble, gobble. Gobble, gobble. So this is for me, this is one of the most, along with Mars, I would say, is probably one of the most malefic combinations that you can have. Particularly Rahu in a fire sign, because it destabilizes Rahu. Rahu prefers to be in air signs and earth signs. When he's in water signs, he gets too emotional and he can't make rational decisions. And when he's in fire signs, he gets overheated, overexcited, compulsive, very, very obsessive, and almost kind of insatiable. Because it's here, he's sped up, it's fire. And Aries is all about going forward, pioneering, trying new things, wanting to be first. So there was always this element, this thirst, this hunger, and it's there in the 8th house. So this can literally show that hunger for that lifestyle, that sex, drugs, and rock and roll lifestyle. And that she was, and of course, you know, her lifestyle would have been, you know, was actually very flamboyant. And of course, she would have been a playmate at some point. Which, you know, means she would have been, you know, around people like Hugh Hefner and, you know, obviously the Playboy magazine, that industry. There would have been sort of like drugs everywhere. You can imagine a lot of other stuff going on that's connected with the 8th house. The 8th house does deal with sex as well. It can also be the darker side. So there would have been a lot of that going on. As you can imagine, you know, these wealthy men, you know, who want to be, you know, with these play bunnies and, you know, Playboy models, you know, it's just one of these things. So it means that she would have experienced every aspect of the entertainment industry in that sense. Yeah. Because we're talking about someone that was already that by this stage had become part of Hollywood. was already a model and a Playboy model at that, and would have been experiencing all these different things. So here, when the drugs and stuff were offered, because you can imagine, you know, a lot of these models, they start out quite young, and then you're just in these environments, and that's what's happened. Some people can resist those environments, but many can't, and most people can't, you know, because it's like there is that pressure to want to live up to a certain expectation, to perform, not to let people down. And also as well, if there's some difficult things that happened, maybe being with people that you don't want to be with, particularly sexually, in regards to the eighth house, then drugs might be a bit of an escape from that. Because remember, we're dealing with actually someone that was actually a very sensitive soul, actually, a very sensitive soul. Because, you know, she does have the Sun and Neptune in Scorpio, which is about death, but Saturn is in Pisces, yeah? So there's this element there of this longing, yeah? Never feeling quite maybe looked after, feeling less than, because wherever Saturn sits, it can bring some pressure, some kind of restriction. And she probably always dreamed that she obviously, you know, didn't come from the best home, unfortunately for her. And this would have been something that played in her mind. And, you know, marriage also would have also been an attempt at escape from that, because she did marry at 17. And then she divorced in 1993. And then by 1994, she'd married, you know, Howard Marshall. So, and she would have also as well would have had a young child as well at that point, and that needed support. And she was probably tired of dancing, you know, in clubs. You know, I mean, that's a classic. That's a classic, because the eighth house deals with what? Shame and disgrace. Not that it's shameful to dance in a club, but it's not necessarily something you want to put on your CV. And if you see, there's a lot of drishti here as well. There's drishti from Mars, and there's also drishti from Jupiter, which is actually giving a bit of a blessing here, actually. And that's probably how she got out of her scenario. And there's also drishti from Mercury, which is a benefic. So that's where she met him. But there was this vulnerability to drink and drugs. But for me, one of the big clinchers is here. If we look here, and we see her Jupiter. Now, her Jupiter is actually really quite strong. She's got Jupiter in the sign of Leo, which deals with leadership. Yeah, leadership and fame as well. Fame as well, being well known. Leo, all of Leo actually deals with fame, renown, leadership. It's being on the stage. Leo is the stage of life. And to have Jupiter there is actually a real blessing. Jupiter does very, very well in the sign of Leo. But you'll also see, look, there's Pluto there as well. And Pluto adds an intensity there. I mean, the aspect is not particularly close, but this would have been certainly a psychological aspect there, something deep down. And it's in the 12th house, and the 12th house deals with what? Secrets, loss. So there would have been some kind of deep sense of loss and longing, and even family traumas and stuff like that for Anna Nicole Smith, somewhere in her background, particularly in her family background. That would have been very much the case. But she also had the Jupiter as well being strong, which allowed her to perform as well, and to be optimistic and go forward with faith that she could make it. Because, I mean, she was very famous at one point, and her television show was actually one of the highest rated reality TV shows at the time. So you can see that Jupiter did bless her with a big show and with fame. But the 12th house does deal with addictions as well. And it deals with losses and endings. And when we look here, having that Pluto there in the 12th house, that can show that these were really deep issues of a psychological nature. There was the doctor that said that she thought Anna Nicole Smith was bipolar, and that's probably correct. So there was a lot on her plate, an awful lot on her plate. And essentially, after the husband died, there was a whole slew of lawsuits that took place. And I'm not going to bore you with the detail of everything like that, but I read through the whole lot and there was a lot. And essentially, Anna Nicole said that her late husband had made a verbal agreement with her to say, you know, to basically give her half of the estate, a portion of the estate. This naturally was challenged by a family member, Howard Marshall's son, who disputed her case. Now, at one point, she was awarded a sum of sort of like 448 million or something like that, which was based on the increase in the value of shares that had happened while she was married to her husband. But anyway, it was awarded and it was taken away. It was reviewed, you know, semi-awarded, then retracted, taken back. But in the end, she never got the money in the end. And if we think here as well of this Ketu in the second house, which deals with savings and deals with money, when you've got Ketu there, it can give one potentially an extreme fortune because Ketu doesn't care about money, but it can also show that there will be money problems because it's like a little black hole in the chart. You don't want Ketu in your second house, ideally, yeah, unless it's exalted and doing very, very well. That can be difficult for finance. And of course, having Saturn in the seventh house, which also deals with litigation, but look, you'll see, remember that Chiron there. So it shows, look, a wound via marriage. Obviously, this was a second marriage. The first marriage didn't work out. But it can also show as well litigation, wounds via litigation. And this is definitely something that happened. And what is interesting as well, particularly for Anna Nicole's chart, you will see that Jupiter actually this time becomes exalted in her second half of life chart, yeah, when she got married. So again, when she got married, she would have been technically on paper wealthy, yeah, but it's still the 12th house. Chiron is still there, and there's Neptune. There's Neptune. So Jupiter exalted in the sign of Cancer, but Neptune is there. And Chiron is there, which is the wounded healer. So she didn't escape those addictions. So what I've written here, continued addictions to quell the emotions. So I think what was happening here is that there was so much going on in her life. Her life was so chaotic, falling apart. There were all of these different men that were claiming to be the father of this, that, and the other, and all these different affairs that she had going on. Because remember as well, the 12th house is also what? Bed pleasures. Yeah? Affairs. She had many affairs. Secrets. All of that kind of thing. So that is a big part. And if we see here, Jupiter does represent the special men in a woman's life, so we can see exalted. So I mean, she had plenty of offers, but you can see there's wounds there, and that Neptune just creating those illusions, deceptions. She probably never quite knew how these men felt about her, but also as well, she probably may have had conflicting feelings about them, of who she really loved and didn't love. But at the same time, there was some long-term relationships there as well, like with the lawyer. That was an on and off, you know, well, not that was a continuous relationship that went on for decades, over a decade. So there was no lack of male attention, as one can imagine. You know, she was a model, and not only that, she was a Playboy model as well, and that does, as we can imagine, would attract a certain type of man. So there was never a shortage of that. But I just think that the whole thing just became too much. I think the emotions it was just too much in the end. And she succumbed, unfortunately, on the 8th of February 2007. And unfortunately, you know, it didn't quite work out. And I think ultimately that Rahu in the 8th house, combined with the repetition of Jupiter in the 12th house in both charts, didn't help. Ultimately, it didn't help. I think it was just a bit too much, and it was a bit too overwhelming. And particularly as well with the sun here with Saturn, these two planets will be starving each other. Even though Saturn is exalted, the sun is very weak. And the sun is what? The vitality, our ability to continue, to go on. The sun moves 1 degree every day regardless. Even if planet Earth were to explode tomorrow, the sun would still be there. Yeah? The sun represents consistency. So when you see it debilitated in a Navamsha, it can show that sometimes a person can struggle to carry on if they face too much adversity because they don't quite have the strength from the sun to kind of pull them through. She did have the Saturn here, which of course was the husband, but he passed away, so she could no longer benefit from that physical presence there of the planet. So I know that wasn't necessarily the most cheery of these charts, but I just wanted to kind of show how you can see addiction potentially in a chart, because it is a big problem for a lot of people. And just because you've got a planet in a Dusthana, which is the 6th house, the 8th house, and the 12th house, doesn't automatically mean that you will face an addiction. It could be an obsession. It could actually be something that could actually work out quite well. It could be it could be an extreme passion. But with Rahu having that Jupiter twice in the 8th house, with Rahu in the 8th, that is very difficult to overcome. And then, of course, all of the legal problems and everything else in life, and that debilitated Venus in the 1st house, life just went into a tailspin, and that debilitated Sun in the 2nd half of life in the Navamsha meant that she didn't quite have the strength to hold it all together and fight everything off. So I will leave it there. It's actually quite early hours in the morning now. What is it? It's 16 minutes past 1, but I wanted to make sure that you guys got this video. So I'll just edit this together now, and I will publish that up, and you will see the video. I'll obviously post another video next week, and there's so many people on my list to kind of go through. So I'll keep you informed of what that is going to be. And I'll also be looking at Tucker Carlson. No, I've done Tucker Carlson. I will be looking at Ron DeSantis for my live on Wednesday. So remember that. Tune in for that one, folks. I'm sure you do anyway, because obviously here it is, the membership. So again, thank you so much. Thank you so much for all of the support. It is wonderful. I hope you've enjoyed this video and it's given you an insight into how addiction can be seen in a person's chart. And I will catch you on the next one. So have a great day. All right. Thanks so much.